Most people lose power the moment they open their mouth. They reveal intentions, weaknesses, emotions, and plans without realizing they're handing away leverage. The more they speak, the more predictable they become. You operate differently. You understand that silence is not absence. It is control. When others cannot read you, they cannot prepare for you. They can't resist what they cannot anticipate. Human nature is driven by fear and assumption. When you stay silent, people fill the gaps with their own imagination. They draw conclusions without evidence. They underestimate you or overestimate you based only on what they think, not what they know. This is power. The less information you give, the more you control the narrative without effort. Silence is not passive, it is strategic restraint. Most people believe power comes from influence, persuasion, or dominance. But real power is built in the shadows, not in exposure. You win by watching, by understanding, by letting others reveal themselves first. Your silence becomes pressure. Your silence becomes authority. The one who speaks the least holds the advantage, because they show nothing and learn everything. You're here for power, not comfort. You're not interested in speaking to prove who you are. You're interested in winning without needing to explain yourself. This video will reveal the strategic formula Machiavelli used to control outcomes without voice, conflict, or noise. You will learn how to let silence work for you until influence becomes effortless and resistance becomes useless. If you reach this point, comment "I move in silence" so I know who actually thinks like a strategist. Like the video, subscribe to Dark Psychology Blueprint and stay until the end. The next part will change how you operate around every person you meet. Silence reveals others faster than words ever could. When you speak, you show your thinking. When you stay silent, you expose theirs. Silence forces people into a space they are not trained to handle. They become uncomfortable. They rush to fill the quiet, and in their effort to break the tension, they reveal motives, insecurities, intentions, and weaknesses they would normally hide. You learn who seeks control by talking, who seeks approval through explanation, who masks fear with humor, who exaggerates ability to appear strong, and who unconsciously exposes envy when your presence disrupts their ego. You do not need to interrogate them. You only need to leave space where their own words become confessions. Silence is a psychological mirror. It shows more about others than you could ever learn through questioning or argument. Silence also strips away performance. When someone talks uninterrupted, the polished version of themselves collapses. They begin repeating, over-explaining, drifting into real thoughts instead of rehearsed ones. A person cannot maintain a mask for long when the other side is not reacting. Most people are not self-aware enough to track what they reveal while they speak, and the longer they talk, the more slips occur. They share relationships, past failures, ambitions, grudges, private opinions, alliances, secret frustrations, and vulnerabilities. They believe they are leading the conversation, but your silence makes them the one exposed. You remain unreadable. They become an open file. Silence also creates a power imbalance. The one who speaks feels pressure to impress, persuade, justify, or entertain. The one who listens holds control. You observe patterns others never see. You track emotional triggers. You test reactions by offering none. You watch how people adjust when they receive no validation. You learn which topics make their voice tighten, which questions make them hesitate, which words make them defensive. Meanwhile, you give nothing in return, no intention, no direction, no weakness. Power sits in the side that reveals less. A silent man is difficult to predict, difficult to manipulate, difficult to disarm. You gain influence by withholding expression, not by displaying it. When others speak freely while you stay reserved, you leave the interaction stronger than you entered. They leave lighter because they emptied themselves. You leave heavier because you collected information. They gave knowledge without asking for any in return. This is why silence works, not because it is quiet, but because it extracts truth without effort. Silence is not lack of communication. It is controlled discovery. Information flows to the quiet mind. People talk most when they feel safe, and silence creates that illusion. When you speak little, others fill the space with their thoughts, opinions, memories, fears, and ambitions. They reveal more to a quiet listener than they ever would to someone who dominates the conversation. You gather information without requesting it because silence invites disclosure. They assume you are unthreatening, uninterested, or simply respectful. And in that assumption, they remove their guard. The quiet mind becomes the container of private truths, overheard strategies, and unfiltered opinions. You learn how people think when they are not performing, how they justify their choices, and what they value enough to repeat. Most individuals do not realize information is currency. They spend it freely. A quiet mind collects it like wealth. Yes. The quiet mind does not chase information, it attracts it. When you aren't trying to prove intelligence or authority through words, people naturally step into the role of teacher, advisor, or storyteller. Their ego leads them to deliver insight they believe you do not possess. They explain things you already know, and they reveal things you never asked for. They believe they are leading the interaction, but you are directing it by withholding reaction. People reveal alliances, conflicts, opportunities, weaknesses within their group, and flaws in their own reasoning simply because silence signals no competition. The less you assert yourself, the more others assume it is safe to expose themselves completely. Information flows freely to the one who listens without interruption. A talker gathers nothing, they only broadcast. A quiet observer gathers everything. They absorb the environment, the tone, the dynamics, the unspoken tension. You see who watches whom, who defers to whom, who envies whom. You detect power structures that loud people overlook. You notice what everyone else ignores because they are too busy being noticed. When the mind is quiet, observation becomes sharp. You hear not just what people say, but what they avoid saying. You catch hesitation, inconsistency, contradiction. These are the details that build accurate judgment. Only silence allows them to surface. The quiet mind always sees more than the speaking mind because noise blocks perception. Words blind insight. Ego blocks awareness. When you remain quiet, you think instead of react. You observe instead of perform. You gather instead of spend. Information flows toward the silent person because they are the one who can be trusted to hold it. Knowledge enters through silence, not speech. A strategist understands this. You gain power not by speaking intelligently, but by listening intelligently. Uncertainty forces respect. People fear what they cannot calculate. When your thoughts, motives, and intentions remain hidden, others are forced to treat you carefully. They do not know whether you are harmless or dangerous, passive or observing, planning or already executing. This lack of clarity gives you psychological weight without effort. Most individuals base their behavior on predictability. They feel confident when they understand someone's next move, but when you remain unreadable, they cannot anchor themselves. They hesitate before speaking. They watch your reactions. They question how much you already know. Uncertainty shifts the power dynamic instantly. The less predictable you are, the more respect you command, because uncertainty gives you the appearance of depth, strategy, and potential threat. Uncertainty also changes how people speak to you. When they cannot measure where you stand, they approach you with caution. They avoid manipulation because they cannot gauge how you might respond. They avoid disrespect because they cannot determine your consequences. They avoid deception because they cannot predict whether you already see through it. A predictable person can be challenged easily. Their patterns provide a map, but an unpredictable one is dangerous because the cost of misjudging them could be high. People will not risk conflict with someone whose limits are unknown. Respect is not built from words. It is built from uncertainty. Uncertainty also buys you time. When others are unsure what you want, they cannot plan against you. They remain in a state of observation rather than aggression. They watch instead of act. They guess instead of attack. You control the tempo because no one can move confidently when outcome is unclear. You are not forced to reveal yourself or defend yourself. You dictate when things escalate and when they remain still. Uncertainty keeps the battlefield frozen until you decide to move. It gives you space to analyze, gather information, and choose the moment you strike. The cautious opponent is already half defeated, not through force, but through doubt. Being uncertain is not the goal. Creating uncertainty in others is. Your silence must be intentional. Your reactions must be minimal. Your decisions must appear calculated. When people know too much, they relax. When they know little, they prepare. Respect is not earned by explaining yourself. It is earned by being a presence they cannot fully read. The mind feels safest with clarity. Remove clarity, and you become someone they handle with respect, distance, and alert attention, because uncertainty is the shadow of power. Your silence creates pressure. They feel, but can't measure. When you say nothing, you remove all reference points others rely on to judge your intentions. In conversation, silence is not neutral. It is a signal they cannot decode. The human mind demands clarity, explanation, feedback, reaction. When you offer none, you create an invisible tension that forces others to question what you are thinking, what you have noticed, and what you might do next. They become cautious because they cannot evaluate your position or predict your moves. The absence of response becomes weight. They feel watched, assessed, or judged without knowing for certain. This pressure is effective because it is intangible. There is no attack to defend against, no argument to counter, no intention to confirm. They are left alone with their own insecurity, and insecurity grows in silence. The pressure you create with silence affects behavior more than confrontation ever could. People start adjusting their words, tone, posture, and decisions to avoid your unseen judgment. They interpret silence as superiority, restraint, or silent evaluation. Even if you are simply observing, they assume you are thinking deeply. They edit themselves in real time. They become more careful, more revealing, more deferential. They attempt to fill the space you leave open, believing that solving your silence will restore comfort. This is the trap. The more they speak to ease discomfort, the more information you collect. Without exerting effort, you guide them into exposing intentions, alliances, and vulnerabilities. Silence dominates not by attack, but by forcing others to wrestle with their own uncertainty. This form of pressure also prevents manipulation. People cannot influence what they cannot read. If you react, they learn how to provoke. If you explain, they learn how to persuade. But when you remain controlled and quiet, they cannot locate your emotional triggers or strategic priorities. Your silence denies them leverage. It denies them the footholds required to sway you. They are left guessing, and guessing destabilizes confidence. The manipulator loses power when their target does not respond. The strategist gains power when the room waits for their voice and never receives it until the moment benefits them. Silence becomes command, not passivity. The true effect of silent pressure is that it shifts control without visibility. You do not need to dominate the conversation to dominate the room. You do not need to speak to influence. People react not to your words, but to your absence of them. They overthink, interpret incorrectly, reveal more, restrain themselves, and question your perception. You remain centered, unexposed, unreadable. They feel the pressure but cannot measure it, and anything that cannot be measured cannot be countered. Silence, when controlled deliberately, becomes a form of power few ever learn to master. Not reacting is more powerful than reacting well. When you react, you reveal your emotional state, your priorities, and your vulnerabilities. Even a well-constructed response exposes something: irritation, pride, insecurity, interest, or attachment. The moment you respond, you show that the other person influenced you, even if slightly. Power is not proven by speaking with strength. It is proven by showing that nothing shakes your position. Not reacting denies others the victory of affecting you. Silence and composure force them to question whether their attempt failed, whether you even noticed, or whether you are waiting to strike on your own terms. The absence of reaction destabilizes more effectively than argument, defense, or counterattack. You maintain the upper ground because you refuse to be moved. People test each other constantly through tone, disrespect, provocation, or subtle challenges. Most respond immediately, trying to defend their image or prove themselves. That is the mistake. Reaction shows insecurity. Reaction confirms that the challenge mattered. The one who does not react communicates something different, that the provocation was too small to acknowledge. This shifts the psychological dynamic. The aggressor begins to second-guess themselves. They wonder what you are thinking, whether you are planning a response, or whether you view them as irrelevant. Their confidence weakens because the silence removes certainty. They expected fire and received nothing, and nothing is harder to deal with than a counterattack that never arrives. Not reacting also grants you time. You observe before you speak. You think before you move. You allow emotion to pass before strategy begins. In that gap, you see what the reactive mind cannot. You learn what the other person wanted from you: validation, conflict, fear, approval, dominance. You learn whether their move was emotional or calculated. You analyze consequences before you choose a response. Often, you will see that no response is the victory. Sometimes the best strike is the one never delivered, because it forces the opponent to remain tense, waiting for a retaliation that will not come. Their fear is extended. Their anticipation drains them. Your restraint protects you. Power is not shown through confrontation, argument, or visible strength. Power is shown through stability. Composure under pressure is more threatening than aggression. A person who does not react cannot be controlled, manipulated, or read. The world is loud. Those who remain unmoved stand out. When you learn to withhold reaction, you turn the game around. Others reveal themselves, while you reveal nothing. That is why not reacting is stronger than reacting well. Speak only when words change outcomes. Most people speak to be seen, to be heard, or to fill silence. None of those actions produce power. Words should function like moves on a chessboard, rare, targeted, and designed to shift position in your favor. Speaking without impact wastes leverage. Every word you release becomes information others can analyze, store, or use against you later. When you speak only to influence outcomes, you remove unnecessary exposure. You avoid emotional disclosure, you avoid accidental confession, and you avoid giving people insight into your reasoning. Power is not in speaking. Power is in controlling when speech occurs and what it accomplishes. You must treat your voice as a weapon, not an instinct. Before speaking, ask only one question: will these words change something? If the answer is no, silence is the correct move. Most conflicts expand because someone needed the last word. Most strategies fail because someone explained too much. Most reputations fall because someone reacted to emotion instead of outcome. A strategist speaks only when a sentence advances position, when it shifts perception, reinforces control, secures loyalty, or closes a negotiation. Anything else is wasted influence. The fewer words you use, the more weight each one carries. Speaking only with purpose also creates psychological authority. When you are selective with your voice, people pay attention. They listen closely because you do not speak often. They evaluate your words because you do not use them lightly. Your presence becomes heavier, your sentences more impactful, your silence more respected. Others cannot predict what you will say because you are not driven by impulse. You speak only when necessary, which forces people to reconsider their assumptions about you. They cannot manipulate you if they cannot trigger you to speak. They cannot control a conversation you do not feed. You lead by saying less, not more. When you speak only to change outcomes, your speech becomes strategy. You negotiate with precision. You correct only when advantage is gained. You reveal nothing you do not intend to. The average person talks to release emotion. The strategist talks to shape reality. You do not speak to prove intelligence. You speak to produce effect. Control is measured by discipline, not expression. If words do not move power, they are noise. Silence is the filter. Speech is the blade. Use voice only when it cuts the direction you want. Calmness is authority. Stillness is dominance. A person who remains calm controls the environment. When others raise their voice, you do not move. When they become emotional, you stay measured. When people cannot shake you, they begin to adjust themselves around you. Calmness communicates control because it shows you are not threatened, not insecure, not desperate to prove strength. The mind that can remain composed under pressure demonstrates superiority without needing to assert it verbally. People rely on emotional reactions to test power. Anger reveals insecurity. Panic reveals weakness. Over-explanation reveals uncertainty. When you refuse to react in these ways, you remove their ability to dominate the interaction. Calmness becomes evidence of internal authority. Stillness amplifies this effect. Movement signals discomfort. Over-talking signals insecurity. Constant reaction signals lack of internal grounding. Stillness, however, projects confidence. It shows that you are thinking, not scrambling. It shows that you choose rather than respond. People with no power need to prove themselves constantly through noise, expression, and visible aggression. Someone who sits still, listens, and observes without urgency appears stronger because stillness is rare. You are not pushed by the moment. You control the pace. You are not led by external pressure. You decide when and how to move. Stillness forces others to evaluate your depth, your intent, and your potential. They may not know your plan, but they sense you have one. This calm stillness changes how people interact with you. They choose words carefully. They lower tone. They avoid careless behavior. They feel observed even when you are silent. People fear the quiet one more than the loud one. Because the quiet one could be calculating. They know how to read anger. They know how to read shouting. They do not know how to read silence. A person who does not rush is difficult to manipulate. A person who does not react is difficult to control. You build authority not by demanding respect, but by existing in a state that makes others regulate themselves. Dominance is not noise. Dominance is presence. When your emotional baseline cannot be shaken, you project stability and depth. You make others feel seen, evaluated, and measured without saying a word. This shifts power naturally into your hands. Calmness signals control of self. Stillness signals control of environment. When you master both, you no longer chase influence. Influence gravitates toward you. You do not command authority, you become authority. When you reveal nothing, they fear everything. People can only relax when they believe they understand you. When they know your goals, they prepare responses. When they know your weaknesses, they test them. When they know your personality, they learn how to manipulate it. But when you reveal nothing, not intentions, not emotions, not reactions, the human mind defaults to uncertainty. They begin imagining what you might be capable of, what you could be planning, and how much you have already seen. Their own thoughts turn into your leverage. The unknown version of you becomes more threatening than the real version. They fill the gaps with caution, speculation, even paranoia. You do not create fear through action. You create fear through absence of clarity. They cannot read you, so they prepare for possibilities that may not exist. Revealed intentions make people comfortable. Hidden intentions make them cautious. When you speak little, people monitor you more closely. They assume you have reasoning they do not know, information they do not have, and standards they have not met. They do not know whether they should treat you as ally, threat, or neutral force, so they avoid crossing you altogether. They hesitate before speaking freely. They filter their behavior. They analyze small details to try to decode you. You hold power because they cannot predict you. A predictable person invites strategy. An unreadable one interrupts it. The less they know, the more they prepare. The more they prepare, the more they fear being unprepared. Silence and emotional restraint create a psychological imbalance. You stay controlled. They become reactive. You observe quietly, they reveal themselves, trying to understand you. You do nothing, yet they adjust their behavior. If you reveal nothing, they assume everything. They imagine you know more than you do. They believe you are planning more than you are. People fear their own ideas more than your actual intention. They suffer confusion while you maintain clarity. This is the essence of power without conflict, influence created from uncertainty rather than force. When you are unreadable, you become the variable they cannot calculate. Your goal is not to threaten. Your goal is to remain unmanageable. The enemy you know is manageable. The enemy you cannot read is dangerous. If you reveal nothing, others must assume you might be capable of everything. You do not need to prove power, you only need to deny predictability. This creates a silent authority. It makes others think twice before lying, attacking, manipulating, or challenging you. When nothing about you is obvious, fear takes the place of knowledge. And fear, in power, is often more useful than understanding. If you understand these principles, you no longer move like the ordinary mind. You don't speak to be heard, you don't reveal to be understood, and you don't react to prove control. You operate from position, not emotion. Power shifts toward silence, toward unpredictability, toward the person who says less and sees more. You are no longer playing for attention, you are playing for advantage. Most people waste their voice proving intelligence. You conserve yours and let observation build it for you. You don't announce intentions, you execute them. You don't push for dominance, you let others give it away through their own insecurity. This is the difference between someone who wants power and someone who understands how power is obtained. You already know which side you belong to. If you've reached this point, comment "I win" without speaking, so I know who actually finished the video and who thinks like a strategist. Subscribe to Dark Psychology Blueprint. Stay close and don't miss what comes next, because the next lesson will take you deeper into power than most people ever dare to think.